Gather around, kids, gather around. Let me tell you the story about how I was in attendance for the Cleveland Browns franchise quarterback's first ever NFL start in London. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, I've put on the closest thing that I have to a Hawaiian shirt. You guys know why by now. The Hawaiian hunk, the Polynesian prince himself, Dllon Gabriel, has been announced as the Browns starter, starting this week in London against the Vikings. Going to talk about what that means, what to expect, all of that good stuff. I'm a couple of hours late on this, I know, but that's because I got home from work just after the Guardians game had just started. Put myself through 8 innings of pretty awful Guardians offense. Pretty exact of what we've seen from the Browns offense this year. But I'm glad I stuck in it. The Guardians bats came alive at the end. They were able to get the win in game 2. Going into game 3 tomorrow. Can't wait. But this is not a Guardians channel. This is a Browns channel. So going to talk about Dllon Gabriel obviously being announced as the new starter. Where do we start with this one? This move felt pretty expected, to say the least. I think pretty much all of us were content with this move after the past weekend against the Lions. In that Lions game, week 1 Flacco wasn't too bad. Week 2 pretty bad. Week 3 pretty bad. Last week awful. I think most fans were ready for this move. The offense has been terrible overall. Let's not, understate that. The offensive line has been atrocious. If you've followed this channel for any period of time, you'll know how much I've been sounding the alarm about this offensive line, and it's been even worse than I expected, and it really has come to fruition. All of the bad stuff that's led to this offensive line getting into the situation it's been in. Cornelius Lucas, I will admit, I missed on that one. I thought that was a decent pickup. A veteran swing tackle, experience at both left and right tackle, graded out pretty well last year. I thought, can't be much worse than what we had last year. Turns out it is much worse. Cornelius Lucas, or Corn Lucas as he will now be known as, hopefully does not see the field again, because he has been unplayable. He's given up the most pressures, I'm pretty sure, by any offensive tackle through the first 4 weeks. And he hasn't even started every game. So he has been very, very bad. The Browns' offensive line as a whole has been bad. Wyatt Teller has been pretty awful as well. The wide receivers have not been great. When Flacco has been able to get them the ball, we've seen drops. Just carrying on from last year, the drops that we've seen, not even just last year, even the years before, with this wide receiver core. They've not been getting much separation, shall we say. There's been plenty of tape out there of opposition DBs pretty much running the Browns wide receivers routes for them. The offense has been terrible. There's no sugarcoating it. Pretty much from top to bottom, the offense has been terrible. That starts with the guy in charge of the offense, Kevin Stefanski, and that goes all the way down to the person snapping the ball. They're all accountable in this, and they all have to improve and put things together to make this offense get better as a whole and as a whole unit. But that doesn't mean that, at the end of the day that Flacco hasn't been bad. Flacco has also been awful, and he has contributed to that. In 4 games, he's completing less than 60% of his passes, 2 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. I'm pretty sure it's 8 turnovers altogether with the 2 fumbles as well. He's been really bad. The tape is awful. Last week's was genuinely horrific. The 2 interceptions are even worse on the All-22 than they were on the broadcast, and they were really bad on the broadcast. So that is saying something. It became untenable at this point. You could not start Flacco and also pretend that you're trying to win football games. Those 2 things would not have added up. It got to the point where it was that bad you had to make this move. At the end of the day, the Browns have got 2 rookie quarterbacks. This is why they drafted 2 rookie quarterbacks. No one went into this season believing that the Browns were going to contend for a Super Bowl. A lot of people viewed this season as a transition year. You've got 2 rookie quarterbacks. There's just absolutely no reason to keep trotting Flacco out there. I'd love to sit here and do the I told you so stuff, but I'm not about that. That's because, and every time that you do that, it always comes flying back in your face when you say something wrong. Everyone says things wrong. But as someone that was pretty adamant as not wanting Joe Flacco to be the starter this year, I spoke all off season about how I did not want it to be Flacco. Kenny Pickett was my choice. Not saying that I wanted Kenny Pickett to be the starter because I thought that Kenny Pickett was going to go on and be the Browns starter for 10 years. I just did not see any point in starting Joe Flacco in a season where you're in a transition year. I mentioned it at the time. The only reason you would even entertain playing Flacco is because you do believe that this team is actually better than other people believe, and you think you can actually win games with Flacco. They obviously believe that. That's what they tried to do. They're 1-3. It didn't work out. As I said, it's been bad. The stats are bad. The tape is bad. It's all bad. But at the end of the day, as I said, the only argument you could even make for Flacco being out there, whether that's this week, last week, or 4 months ago, was playing winning football, and you're not winning football games with Joe Flacco. So, as I said, there's just absolutely no point for him being out there. I'm happy that the Browns have made this move. I was ready for this move after week 2, if we're being honest. But obviously you can't make it that early. But what should we expect from Dllon? This is, of course, also dependent on the offense around him. Everything I just said. If this offensive line can't hold up, and obviously especially going against a Brian Flores defense, Brian Flores has a history of torturing rookie quarterbacks, shall we say. This is a very complex defensive coordinator. He can confuse guys. He's got lots of ammo to work with there in Minnesota. They got a great defense. So, if this offensive line just literally can't hold up, then you can't really get that great of an evaluation on Dllon, because he'll just be out there running for his life. The Browns have, of course, brought in Cam Robinson. They traded for him. I was tempted to do a video on that, but I'll be honest, I didn't want to do a whole video based on just Cam Robinson. Cam Robinson's not great. I'll be honest, he's not very good. But he is better than what we've had this year. He's graded out around the mid-60s this year. Funnily enough, he's actually been graded as a better run blocker this year for the first time in his career. Someone that has, built a rep, shall we say, as a adequate pass blocker, shall we say. That is the reason why he's been able to get as many starts in the NFL as he has. So it's not amazing, don't get me wrong, it's not great by any means, but it's better than what we have. What we have are grading out at the low 40s this year at the tackle position. So, if he can come in and improve this offensive line, then obviously that is going to help. The wide receivers around, again, they need to start catching the ball. They need to give their quarterback a chance. But it obviously does also come down to Dllon as well. Dllon, part of the problem with Flacco being back there, when you've got a bad offensive line, you just can't have a 40-year-old statue behind it. That's just a recipe for disaster. Dllon is going to be able to extend plays more. He's going to be able to get out of a few of those sacks that Joe Flacco was unable to get out of. He's going to be able to, negate the effects of a bad offensive line more than a 40-year-old statue. Joe Flacco was never known as anything other than a pocket passer in his prime. At 40 years old, you can't expect Joe Flacco to be out there running around. This is a guy who last week had like 5+ yards of space in front of him and couldn't even get a yard with his legs. He was a statue back there. Just having Dllon back there should negate some of the effects of the offensive line. But again, the offensive line still has to improve because you can't justify having that bad of an offensive line with a rookie behind them. I mentioned with the wide receivers, obviously, Tillman and Carter are both on IR. I'll be honest, that might be it for Tillman. He's not been able to take advantage of the opportunities that he's gotten, whether it be through injuries or bad play. Those two guys are obviously out. That meant the Browns have two more holes in what is an already pretty weak wide receiver room. And obviously they've responded to that by elevating Malachi Corley, who I thought we might have seen even earlier, but he finally gets his opportunity, and obviously fan favourite Gage Larvadain as well. If those guys can come in and just provide any spark to this wide receiver room and to this offense, combine that with hopefully Cam Robinson shoring up slightly one of those sides on the offensive line, pair that with Dillon Gabriel being able to extend plays more with his legs. Dillon Gabriel is a decent athlete. This is someone that was able to use his legs in college. He's not Lamar Jackson. Nobody's Lamar Jackson. He's not even maybe a Bo Nix, shall we say, but he's a similar archetype to a Bo Nix, where he is able to use his legs. He is sneakily athletic. So he should be able to get out of those, some of those situations that Joe Flacco was unable to get out of. With Dillon Gabriel as well, one of the things that I was high on him about, one of the biggest things that I liked about him was his quick release and his ability to operate within structure. His legs will somewhat negate the bad offensive line play, and so will that quick release. And obviously, he can get the ball out quick. You can play a more quick, a more shorter passing game with Dillon. Not saying that obviously Flacco can't do that as an 18-year-old vet, but Flacco is prone to maybe trying to go downfield a little bit more than someone like Dillon. Dillon is going to stick within structure. He is going to do what the offense wants him to do. He is going to do what the play call asks him to do, and he will get the ball out quick. So, the Browns are obviously going to have a less sophisticated offensive game plan for this game. Obviously, when you're going with a rookie instead of an 18-year vet, that's to be expected, and that might actually work to their advantage, especially against the Vikings, and that obviously that pass rush and that defense. If you can just play a more simple offensive game plan, get the ball out quick, play smart football, don't turn the ball over. Pair that with the Browns defense, and that gives them a better chance to win games than Joe Flacco out there throwing 2 interceptions a game. That's just a fact at this point. I do think Dillon can bring things that this offense needs, and this offense needs a lot. Don't get me wrong; he's not going to come in and light the league up and completely transform this offense. But I do think there are areas that he will be better than Joe Flacco. And at the end of the day, even if he's not, I'd rather know that with the rookie than the 40-year-old. At this point, we know what Joe Flacco is. We know what he is at his best. We've most likely know what is at his worst. Hopefully, we don't find out that can get even more worse. But with Dillon Gabriel, we don't know that. This is a rookie. So, and a third-round rookie. Mid-round rookies, late-round rookies, not much to be expected of them, but third round is, it's a top 100 pick. The Browns identified Dillon Gabriel as their target at quarterback this year. They went out and got him earlier than some people thought that Dillon Gabriel would have went, so they believed in him. Let's see what he can do in this offense, and if he's bad, he's bad. If he's good, great. If he's worse than Flacco, then we probably know that he's not an NFL quarterback, because Flacco has not been an NFL quarterback this year. If he's better at Flacco, but just slightly middle in the road, we know that he could maybe be a bridge for whatever guy we bring in next year, or maybe he can show that he can be that good cheap backup option for the next few years when the Browns do make that transition in the quarterback room. Or maybe he goes out there and shows that he's the Browns franchise quarterback. You just never know with a rookie. That's the excitement about it. And, I'd much rather have that as a fan of a 1-3 football team than I would watching a 40-year-old Joe Flacco, who I know exactly who he is. How long will Dillon get, I suppose, is a good question. I think he'll get, we got 13 games left. I think he will get at least 8 games, regardless of how bad he is. Give him 8 games, as bad as it gets, and then if it is untenable by that point, and if he has shown that he's not an NFL quarterback, that's when you bring in, that's when you make the move to a Shedeur Sanders and play him for the last 5 games or 5 or 6 games to see what you get in him. But I don't think this is going to be a matter of what we've seen in previous. I mean, the DTR stuff, that's completely different. This isn't a 5th round pick that was never ever intended to be, starting by any means. Coming in for a game and then you going back to the other quarterback because he was that bad. This is not a case of that at all. Dllon Gabriel will get his opportunity regardless of how bad it gets. Of course, if he's out there getting hurt and putting himself in danger, they are going to pull him. But he'll get every opportunity. He'll be allowed to make those mistakes. And as I said, I think he'll get at least 7-8 games regardless of how bad it is. And obviously, speaking of Shedeur as well, why isn't Shedeur Sanders the backup? That is obviously going to be a big question. I know that's a massive talking point for a lot of the media, shall we say. They love obviously using Shedeur's name for clicks, but I tweeted this out when they made the announcement earlier that Joe Flacco would be the backup, even though he's been benched. There's 2 reasons why the Browns are doing this. You can believe both of these reasons, or you can believe one of these reasons. But in the end of the day, I think these are the only 2 reasons. And that is number 1, they don't believe he's ready to play on an NFL field. They don't believe he's ready to start an NFL game against, when live bullets are flying, real NFL players, not preseason, an actual regular season game. They clearly don't think that he's ready to do that. And 2, that they don't want the media circus that would follow having Shedeur Sanders behind Dllon Gabriel, because as I said earlier, Dllon Gabriel will get a chance to make mistakes. He will get 7-8 games, I think, in my opinion, as bad as it gets. If Shedeur Sanders is behind him in that situation, and he has one bad quarter, one bad fucking throw, and they're going to be calling for Shedeur Sanders when Dllon is in there. You have Joe Flacco behind him, and Dllon makes a bad throw. You're not going to see people calling for Joe Flacco to go back in there. You just don't give any chance for that media circus to be entertained. And as I said, you can believe it. It's one of those things. You can think that the Browns operate based on optics, and they're only doing it because they don't want that media circus. You can think they're doing it purely out of, just strategy. And they think that Dllon can play, and obviously that Shedeur Sanders is not ready. But for me, I think it is both. And, obviously the biggest thing it comes down to... nearly fell off again. The biggest thing it comes down to is that they don't think that Shedeur Sanders is ready, of course. But I do think that there is a slight factor in there of, again, they don't want the... Not just the media, but there'll be some fans in that stadium every time that he throws a bad throw calling for Shedeur Sanders, just given who Shedeur Sanders is, and obviously the media kind of thing that he brings, the media frenzy that he brings with him and his name. So, they're the 2 reasons why Shedeur's not the backup, in my opinion. Will he be the backup one point in this year? I think so. I think we will get to that point. As I said, if Dllon Gabriel is that bad, then I think you do turn to Shedeur Sanders for the last 5 or 6 games. But at this point, I do understand why that Shedeur Sanders is not the backup. But overall, this is really cool for me. I'm going to be at the game this Sunday. I'm going to be at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium watching the Cleveland Browns in London for the first time. And that alone is an amazing moment. You guys all know how much of a Cleveland Browns fan that I am. I'm a very passionate Browns fan, very, very proud to be a Browns fan as well. So I am, just the game itself, I am so excited for. But then add the fact that, a Browns rookie quarterback is going to be making his debut in that game as well while I'm in attendance. That's just, to me, such a cool moment. Regardless of how it ends up, whether it win, lose, Dllon plays great, Dllon plays bad. At the end of the day, that's just going to be such a cool moment for me, such a cool moment for my friends, such a cool moment for the British Browns fans. And, there are a lot of us here. And I'm just, I'm really happy that the timing has worked out like this. It's, as I said, it's a great moment for everyone. when we looked at the schedule and obviously week 5 in London, the Browns quarterback situation, I think a lot of us had in the back of our mind, or maybe that could be the week that they change. But then you kind of thought, well, you are going up against the Vikings. A lot of us obviously expected the Vikings to be a lot better. Obviously not the fault of the defense. It's their offense this year. So maybe we thought, they're not going to start a rookie quarterback in London against a really good defense. Browns clearly feel like they believe in him enough to do that. I think I read earlier that he is now the second rookie quarterback to ever make their debut, in an NFL International Series game. So the second quarterback all time to ever make their debut, not in the USA. It's going to be an amazing moment. I'm pretty sure that Dllon has actually never left the USA from what I saw earlier. Yes, guys, Hawaii is in the USA, for any British guys listening. So he's apparently never left the USA. Cool for him to obviously make the trip anyway, but to do it in your first ever start, great moment for Dllon, great moment for me. I really... I'll be honest, I really didn't want the one time that I get to see the Browns in London for what could possibly be a decade. I didn't want that to be with a 40-year-old Joe Flacco playing quarterback. I'll be completely honest. So I am very happy about this move. I'm happy about this move in the context of the season. I'm happy about this move in the context of, we're gonna see what we have in Dllon. Maybe we see what we have in Shadur, whatever. But just seeing what we have in these rookies. We drafted these guys for a reason. Let's see if they can get this season somewhat back on track. The Bengals are in. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. Jake Browning is just. I find it hilarious when people were doing the whole. They're not going to trade for everyone because Jake Browning's really good. He's not very good at all, and he's showing you why he's not very good. The Bengals lost their starting quarterback. The Ravens are down like 8 defensive starters, half of them for the year. Lamar Jackson is possibly out for a few weeks. They're 1-3. They're a mess. The only team with a winning record is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Makes me feel sick to say that. But even them, they look crap. They don't even look good. They just keep winning the same way that the Steelers do. They're bound to have their, second half of the season fall off where they go and lose a good 4 and 5 games in that final 7 to 8 game stretch, as they seem to always do. This division could be wide open. It's infuriating how annoying it is that not the 1 year, of course the Browns are bad a lot of years, but a year that we're bad and we're 1-3 is a year that this division is truly wide open. So as I said, from the context of just maybe getting this season back on track, you've got to throw anything you can at it. Joe Flacco was not the answer. Is Dillon Gabriel the answer? Who knows? We'll find out. But I'm excited to obviously see the outcome. I'm excited to see Dillon in London this weekend. Really, really can't wait to see it. So that's everything I can think of for obviously Dillon now being the starter. We will obviously do a preview for that game. I'm away for most of the weekend for the game, so obviously won't be able to record anything there. My review will be probably a day late. Try and get some footage from the game in there as well. But I will do a preview for this game before the weekend. So we'll talk a little bit more about Dillon then, obviously what that means for the offense. And of course, I will talk a bit more about if anyone's coming to the game, where they can find me, whether that's on Saturday or at the game itself on Sunday. But that will do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy this weekend if you don't see my preview and you don't see me before then. But most importantly, go Dillon Gabriel and go Browns.